It is Saturday, March 29th, and today is my first day to get out here to the food plot and get to planting. This year is the first year in a few years that I haven't frost seeded. And I tell you, in Missouri and in many parts of the Midwest, it was a little extreme winter this year. We had a lot of snow. It made it difficult to get out here at the right times to do the frost seeding. But no big deal, just another way to do planting this year for spring planting. What I did today, my process is I came in, I disked up the places I was going to plant. Didn't over disk it, I didn't over till it, but got it worked up enough to where you can see some soil, that you're not just throwing it on foliage and other old forages. But I think it should do really well as far as seed to soil contact, and I'm looking forward to see how it all turns out. What did I plant? As I always recommend, I love to have a nice base of clover over almost the entire food plot. This year, one thing I'm trying differently is I'm plot rotating. So in one half of the plot the last few years, I've had a really nice stand of clover. Last year it dwindled a little bit and just wasn't as lush and thick as it had been. So I thought that this year would be a good idea to alternate those two plots. One of them for now I've left alone. We'll see what clover comes up in it, but my plan is to go ahead and mow that as low as I can beginning of June, and then plant that in milo and cowpeas and grow forage brassica. The other half of it is where I have had milo the last couple of years, and especially last year I had a really good stand of milo and grow forage brassica in there that the deer really loved. But this year I'm rotating that to where I'm going to have that in a stand of clover, and I'm looking forward to see how that goes. One area over by what I call the high-rise stand is one very small plot. It is right next to the hedgerow where the deer bed north of there, and they come through in the evenings typically, sometimes in the mornings. Very small little plot, probably 20 yards long by 10 to 15 yards wide. I put a chicory in there that Grandpa Ray Outdoors has asked me to give a nice test run to. I think it's an experimental chicory. I might give you some more information on that in another video, but we're going to see how that does. I've planted chicory there before and it did really well. I didn't necessarily see deer eating it, but I did watch some rabbits eat on it one evening while I was deer hunting there. And then I also put a little bit of three-way annual clover there. So it's 3 different types of annual clover. Those always do really well. They're quicker growing than a perennial clover. And if you can keep them clipped before they head out, they'll continue to grow throughout the spring. And if you plant them in the fall, they'll come back even the next spring for you as well. What else did I put there? And then lastly, in that little spot, I just put one nice layer of grow forage brassica. I like planting that earlier in the year rather than later. I know that brassicas are typically traditionally thought of as a fall crop, but they did awesome for me last year planting them in June. So I planted a few of them a little bit earlier there in that little spot this year, and we'll see how that goes here in a few weeks. We've got a lot of rain in the forecast this week, so I'm hoping to get some rain there and see how that does. Then in the plot that I said I'm rotating out of milo, I have put the clover craze blend. So that is 3 or 4, I think that's 3 perennial clovers and 1 annual clover in there, a balança fixation clover, a ladino clover, a medium red clover, and I think the 4th one is an alsite clover. So looking forward to how that's going to turn out. And then I also put that chicory in there as well on that bigger area. So excited to see how that goes. But I'm telling you, it worked up really well. We've gone over it with a harrow. I had Dad go over it with the harrow after we were done seeding it all. And I think that really broke up a lot of the clods of dirt that came up in the disking. It also just kind of evened everything out. I considered not harrowing this today because I don't want to bury the seed too deep. With a lot of these crops that I planted today, they only need to be 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch deep. That's enough that a nice rain this week, 1/4 inch of rain, 1/2 inch of rain, 1 inch of rain, that's going to put those down deep enough into the soil that I really don't need harrow necessarily. And I don't want them to be too deep because I think you can go too deep definitely, and that's going to be worse than going too shallow. But really, looking at it now, after the harrow job that Dad did, it really just kind of evened everything out. It broke up a lot of those clods and it just kind of covered that seed. So I think it's going to do really well, and I'm looking forward to see what this week brings with some rain. And then finally in the walkway here, I'm pointing at it because I'm looking at it, and then right behind me in this area in the timber, we put the blend from Grandpa Ray's called Inner Sanctum. I've planted Inner Sanctum before. It's been several years ago, and I'll try to throw some pictures up of how it did that year. Unbeknownst to me, Dad had a lot of ag fertilizer dropped in the walkway that year. I didn't know that. I planted it, and the next thing you knew, it was almost waist high and just did fantastic. I think that one thing Grandpa Ray's has changed in that blend is it used to have kale in it, forage kale. He's replaced that with, swapped the forage kale out and put the grow forage brassica in. So looking forward to see how that turns out, but there's a lot of clovers in there. There's a spring triticale in there as well. And it's really nice for your shady areas, which kind of behind me is a lot of shade a lot of the time. The walkway's a lot of shade a lot of the time as well. And also those inner areas that, you know, deer like to be secluded in, and there's something for them to browse on in that. One thing I'll add to this, and you'll see, my plots are not beautiful. They're not social media worthy for how nicely a seed bed can look, but they're practical in the crop residue you have left over, that I have left over from last year's milo. In my previous video, one of the previous videos I did, you saw me mowing that down and spreading gypsum all over it. There's still a lot of crop residue left there. It's continuing to decompose, put things back into the soil that are going to benefit this year's crop, but also whenever it rains on that, it's going to hold that moisture in the soil longer. If you just have a bare bed of soil, it'll work well for it to rain on it, obviously, but it's not going to stay as moist for as long. So by having some crop residue on top of your soil, it's going to help hold in that moisture, keep it wet longer, give those seeds more of a chance to germinate, give those roots a longer time to collect nutrients, and it's just going to help it have a nice environment to be conducive to growing. So something to consider there. You don't always need to make your plots look beautiful with a nice bare dirt seed bed. I would encourage you guys, if you have some crop residue, it could be grass, it could be last year's clover, it could be something bigger like a milo or a screening of some type. But I'll tell you, having that crop residue definitely holds moisture and helps your forages for this year. This year, I think I went a lot heavier with seed than I have in the past. I think I've always just kind of operated under a tighter budget, so I don't order as much seed. This year, I went a little, you could say overboard. I think this year I've put enough different seed down, enough different forage seed down, that if one of them doesn't pan out, if one of them doesn't work well, then I've got enough other stuff in there to compensate for that, and hopefully still have a good stand of something that's attractive to the deer, that's nutritious to the deer, that's going to be a good quality food plot for the deer. And one other thing I tried to do today is not use all the seed that I had. So I tried to leave a little bit, maybe a pound, half a pound of seed in each bag that I had, that hopefully I'll have enough left over to kind of do a cocktail mix or a cafeteria mix, a smorgasbord, if you will, that's going to be something I can put down in the fall whenever it comes around for some of those thin spots and have a nice fall crop too. I do things a little backwards than I think the traditional thought is I think a lot of guys wait until the fall to really do like their prime time plot. I prefer to have something that I can have in the spring and summer that's going to do well, that's going to carry me all the way into the fall. And then what my fall plot and fall crop ends up being is just kind of where the thin spots are, where I've had something fail and I need to save a plot. That's what I look at as more for a fall crop. So even if it's just winter wheat and winter rye, it's going to be some attractant that's going to benefit you the next spring. I try to have something there through the spring and summer that's going to go all the way through the fall. And then I'm not expecting or hoping for a rain in the fall in late August or September. Then I'm going to not get that much growth. So I try to have something there already established that I can have as a base and then just add to that as the fall comes around. I elected not to fertilize today, but I will come back. After this gets going here, we're going to be getting into April, closer to May. We've still got some colder temperatures in the forecast for nightly lows. So I want to wait until this stuff is able to get germinated to kind of start to get established. And then I'm going to come back and liquid fertilize, foliar feed these forages and look at doing that a little bit later to get the max benefit out of that fertilizer. If you do it too early, whenever the soil is still too warm or whenever the soil is still too cold and whenever your air temperatures still aren't primed for growing, you can end up wasting it. So I want to make the most of the liquid fertilizer that I have. So I'm going to wait to do that. I hope that gives you guys some ideas, some strategies, some tips, some different things to think about as you come into your time to do your spring and summer plots. If you haven't ordered or bought your seed yet, definitely encourage some of these ideas and strategies. Thank you for watching Farming for Whitetails. We'll see you next time.